welcome to this learning module. In this one, we're going to be taking a look at virtual machines. So I'll be talking about how virtual machines can both help and cause problems for digital forensic investigators. We'll take a look at live acquisitions, and we'll just briefly cover some of the standard formats or standard procedures that you would do to monitor live traffic, and we'll think about, if you're doing network forensics, what do you need to have in place to be able to do that type of investigation? So I believe you're pretty familiar with at least what a virtual machine is at this point. And so it's essentially, we're creating a virtual computer on top of a real computer. And I say a real computer, I mean a physical computer. That can be either a type 1, where it runs on bare metal, where there's no Windows operating system or Mac operating system in between the virtual machine and the real machine, the physical computer. So it's what we call a type 1 bare metal. You would typically see these in more larger environments, and they might be running something like VMware ESXi, might be running Xen, or some other type 1 hypervisor. Hyper-V goes by the same name. It can be a type 1 or a type 2. So you could also see Hyper-V. There is also the type 2 hypervisor. That's what you're more familiar with probably. So when you're running VMware Workstation Pro on top of your Windows 10 machine, that's a type 2 hypervisor. Once you install that piece of software, you can then install several other different operating systems. And the same thing goes for the people that we're potentially investigating. They can use these types of setups as well. They either type 1 or type 2. The more sophisticated your suspect or your target of your investigation is, the more complex your investigation is going to be. And I think people have asked this question in the past. What happens if you have nested VMs? So you have your Windows 10 machine, then you're running a type 2 hypervisor, something like VMware Workstation Pro or VirtualBox or Fusion on the Mac, and then, or Parallels, where you're doing a dual boot, which is a little different but still similar. Then you have a virtual machine, and then inside that virtual machine you have another virtual machine, and then inside that one, and so on, and then you have this big inception concept. So is that going to make your job as a forensic investigator more difficult? Absolutely. Are you going to be able to find everything? Like we said several other times throughout the semester, it depends. It depends on your resources. It depends on your skill. It depends on your tools. All right. It depends on your tenacity. So going through and finding that stuff is going to be a challenge. When it saves that virtual hard disk, that VMDK file, you can load that, and I have another video here that will show you how to add a VMDK as an evidence file, and then you can go through and parse it just like you took an acquisition of the entire hard drive. But virtualization definitely creates problems. But let's flip that coin and think about how virtualization can also help our forensic investigators. Say you're investigating something that has a Windows 7 XP or 95 or Windows 3. You probably do not have that machine sitting in your lab ready for you to, kind of go through and do some investigative, figure out where files are typically stored, or to start that operating system up if you needed to for some reason. But what we can do is we can take an image file and we can create a copy, and then if there was some reason that we needed to run that software, we can take that and run that operating system in a virtual environment. There's even some special tools that will essentially connect to a device and boot it up as the suspect would have seen it. And sometimes that can be useful. That's not the standard procedure that we do for computer forensics. Standard procedure is we take an acquisition and we look through the evidence, we look through the file structure. But there's nothing that says that using virtualization to get that additional level of analysis is certainly within reason, and it is certainly allowed. So if you're doing this investigation on a type 2 hypervisor, you'd first want to image the host machine, right? That's your Windows 10 machine. Then you would want to figure out what virtualization software packages are on there. And sometimes they may have been there and they may have been deleted, so you might find traces or evidence in the registry on previously installed software. Then you would want to export all of the host machine files associated with that VM, including all the log files, virtual adapters. You might be able to do some RAM analysis if it created a vmem file. You could also do that. That's also a good resource sometimes. Record all the different values, and then open the VM as an image file in your imaging software, just like I was mentioning a second ago. The next point I want to cover briefly is a live acquisition. So live acquisitions are, again, I think this goes back to Learning Module 3 where we first started talking about live acquisitions, but it is essentially acquiring evidence on a machine that is on, right? So you don't want to turn an off machine on, and you don't want to turn a machine that's currently on off if you plan on doing a live acquisition. There's always trade-offs on doing it live or doing it dead, but most of what you'll see out today is if the machine is on, you have the capabilities and the personnel to do a live acquisition, to do some triage, go ahead and do it. Sometimes it's not triage. Sometimes you want to acquire a live machine that just may be remote, right? It may be something that's on your corporate network that you want to acquire. Maybe you want to do it for stealth purposes. Maybe you want to capture something that's going on right then and there. If you don't record some of that stuff like network traffic as it's happening, and there's no other recording device, then that evidence, that potential source of evidence, it's gone. So that's some of the nuances of doing network forensics and doing live acquisitions. Is to do it live, you have to be there doing it right then. If you're not doing it then, you're not doing it. And if you plan on doing network forensics, it's really going to help you much more to have a plan ahead of time of what will be logged, how it will be logged, where it will be logged. What is the threshold that we start logging something? Having a plan up front really just helps you, figure out when there's a need, because to log everything all the time is going to be very expensive and take up tons of time and resources, and just not practical. Then the other issue to consider with network forensics is if you're in the middle of an attack, you have a decision. Do you let the attack continue and log it so you can kind of hope to figure out what's going on, where is it coming from, where's data going, or do you shut it off as soon as you know about it? If you shut it off right away and you haven't logged anything, well, you cut your major source of evidence of investigative power. But if you allow it to continue, you're allowing data to walk out the door, or you're allowing people to walk through your systems and trash your machines or whatever they're doing in there. So it really becomes a management decision of what are you comfortable with, how far has this gone, how long has this breach been going on. Too often, sadly, the breach has been going on much longer than the administrator is aware of, and the bad guys, if they're skilled bad guys, they've been in there for a while and they've been doing what they've been doing for a while. So if you're able to let it continue for a short period of time, which could be a few minutes, could be a few hours, could be a few days, could be a few weeks. A few weeks doesn't seem short, but depending on what's going where and what the severity of everything is, it's really going to become a management decision to figure out what can we do, what are we comfortable with, what do we want to record. You want to catch the bad guy in the act, so sometimes you have to let him rob that bank so you can see how he's doing it. Then once you have your recorded traffic and everything, then you can start analyzing the traffic, and you can do these through the simplest but one of the most powerful tools that we continue to use is Wireshark TCP replay. That one's really good at letting you replay, hey, what happened? This connected to here, it sent this type of packet here, and did this thing here. You can start doing your analysis after you have your data recorded. Your knowledge of networking and protocols becomes important here when you're trying to figure out some network forensics. You're trying to figure out which device connected where. Sometimes you might need to know which protocols, if it's going through virtual switches versus a real switch, or a layer 3 switch versus a router. All of that can become important information in trying to figure out the track of who did what, where, when, and where were they coming in from, what was trying to be disguised, what can I dissect and try to get back and figure out who did this. So this learning module really covered a couple of different concepts, but related concepts. We had our virtual computing. Virtualization can be good or bad for us. We have live acquisitions. They can be good for us to be stealthy. It can be good for us to be remote. It can be good for us to do something where we're going to lose something due to order of volatility. And then we also covered some network forensics, which we have a whole separate course on network forensics in the program if you're interested in that course. But some of the basic overview of the issues related with network forensics, recording, analysis, all of that information. Thanks.